Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pursuing Excellence podcast. I'm your host, Jay Gay, and today on the podcast I have Professor Elliot. He is a professor at Georgia State University, Perimeter College, the Decatur campus. I appreciate you coming on tonight, Professor Elliot.
No problem at all. I'm happy to do it.
Yes, sir. So before we get started, Professor Elliot, just how's everything going? This year, second, year back from obviously 2020 to COVID and all that kind of stuff. We'll get into a little bit, but how's everything going? You and the family, professionally, how's everything going?
Yeah, everybody's doing well. It's been I've enjoyed getting back in the classroom again. I definitely prefer to be in the classroom as opposed to being online. It's easier to connect with students, easier to form relationships, and I just like the in-classroom face-to-face dynamic much better. So I'm actually happy to be back in the classroom. It's been good to be back. It was a long year for everybody last year, and really ended up being 2.5 semesters of online straight. And I'm very happy to be back in the classroom. I know a lot of my colleagues are as well. So,
right.
Yeah, so other than that, everybody's healthy and we're happy about that. So it's good.
Yes, sir. So if you could just give us a background story on how you got into the profession that you're in right now, as a college instructor, and what brought you to Georgia State University.
Okay. So I was raised in a conservative religious household and was always very interested in theology and things of that nature, philosophical debate and things like that. And then my freshman year of college, I went to Carson Newman College in East Tennessee, now Carson Newman University. And my freshman year, I took a political science class and quickly realized that a lot of the things that interested me in religious theology were that I was much more interested in the political philosophy aspects of political science, and that just struck a chord with me. It didn't hurt anything that my instructor was excellent. He was one of the best. He's still to this day one of the best professors I've ever had. Right. Made it interesting, made it fascinating. It really spoke to me, and I graduated. I started teaching in 2008. And when you're first starting out as an instructor, you pick up a class wherever you can take it. And then I picked up one face-to-face, and I picked up an online first, and then I picked up a face-to-face, and it just kind of kept going. And then when I met my wife in 2010, I was looking to move to Georgia for opportunities, and she was here as well, and that looked like we were going to settle down. And I applied at Perimeter College, and got on as an adjunct, and then worked part-time for a few years, which is what a lot of people have to do. And then a full-time position opened up, and I got it, and I've been there ever since. So that was 2015. So long journey, hard journey at times, but a good journey for the most part.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So you alluded to this earlier. How would you say, because the coronavirus obviously impacted all of us in ways we didn't even think were possible. It struck last year in March. We didn't know what was next. So just talk about how it affected you as a collegiate instructor, and just outside of your profession as well, just at home. How did it affect you?
I mean, from a workplace standpoint, dealing with the pandemic has been hard on everybody. I mean, there are people who were being forced to go to work, and really, especially early on, way before we had the vaccines, there were people having to put their lives into healthcare workers, frontline workers, grocery store workers, anybody who was forced to continue to be out. They shut us down at Georgia State. We were out of the classroom pretty quick. It was mid-March when the last time I was in face-to-face. So mainly it was getting childcare, trying to help children with virtual. I have two young girls. So that was probably one of the biggest challenges. My wife, both of our careers easily were switched to remote, which was a very fortunate thing that a lot of people were not fortunate enough to have. But as an instructor now dealing with coronavirus, I feel honestly like one of the most difficult parts is dealing with misinformation, dealing with certain skepticisms, and misinformation that circulates rampantly, trying to talk people through that, which isn't often very successful. That for me, that's been one of the biggest burdens is the watching the social impacts that this virus has had on people. The isolation that a lot of people have felt. Most negative social categories are way up: suicides, things like that, feelings of depression, isolation. Um, those are all things that really weigh on me when I look at how things are going. I mean, we should be through this by now, and unfortunately, we're not. And a lot of areas are having their worst time. As we sit here on October 4th, 2021, a lot of several areas in the country are experiencing their worst stint with the pandemic yet. And it's unfortunate. I hoped I would live my entire life without ever having to live through a pandemic. I've studied them in the past, but here we are, unfortunately. So that's kind of where it is.
Yes, sir. Yeah, like you said, just having to make that switch from in person to online. I know it affected not just the instructors and the kids, but the parents as well. So as a student myself, it was hard making that adjustment, going from in person to online, and because I learned better in person than I do online. So, but obviously,
And you were a senior. You were in senior in high school last year, right?
uh,
Correct.
this past year, yes, I was a senior. So when it
So,
hit,
so
I
you
was
had to
a
spend your yeah.
junior,
So you had to spend your junior year out of the classroom.
the second semester.
Yeah. See, that's super unfortunate for all the things that you're missing out on as well. You know, a lot of students went through that. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yes, sir. So moving on to our next question, Professor Elliott, do you feel that our nation's government did a good job of handling the virus when it hit, or could they have done some things better? Talk about that.
Oh, that's a very loaded question through both administrations. The initial response by the Trump administration probably should have been taken more seriously early on, but just to give a little bit of leeway, I don't. I think there were. It was hard to. I think it was hard for many in the administration to know exactly how bad this was going to get. Certain things like testing early on should have been handled. Trying to push access to easy, quick testing as soon as it was available definitely should have been handled better, in my opinion. The personal perspective of the president did not help in regards to not. I think things could have been handled a lot better if President Trump would have come out and been much more just sort of handed it over to science as far as saying, like, this is what they're recommending, this is what we're going to do. And there was definitely some mixed messaging. Now, what the Trump administration should get a lot of credit for is they basically got all the regulatory issues out of the way, the things that usually take the FDA such a long time. And I honestly believe that they were able to do it without compromising quality. They just simply got a lot of what is called bureaucratic red tape out of the way. They threw the resources of the federal government behind development of a vaccine, and we developed a vaccine, something that usually takes anywhere from 5 to 10 years to develop, was done so really within inside of a year. And that is a frontier of science. That is a monumental moment in science, what they have done with the vaccine, which I have zero reservations about personally. And then once President Trump was out of office, the Biden administration came in and they set a very clear goal of having 100 million people vaccinated by his first 100 days in office. That was a noble goal. They actually exceeded that. But the CDC under President Biden's leadership has also had some mixed messaging. And when you have a public that is scared and you have a public that is being fed misinformation from every news source that they seek out, government agencies have to be 100% clear, and they have to be very direct and intentional with how they circulate their messaging. And both administrations had significant moments of mishap with this, to say the least, where the messaging got convoluted. The CDC changes its guidelines Fauci in the beginning is saying that masks don't really do the job, and he says now that he was doing that because he didn't want to create a hoarding situation with
Yeah.
the masks. And I understand a lot of those reasons, and a lot of them make sense. But we have such a skeptical public now that you have really got to make sure that your messaging is on on point, very clear, very concise, and and you really only get one shot with the public the way things are now, and those are the things that weren't handled very well. And to be honest, the testing in a lot of areas in this country is still difficult to find. It's not rapid, it's not quick in some areas of the country, and we could really do make a lot of progress. And I think we could have gotten back to normal a lot earlier, if testing, especially early on, had been handled. But unfortunately, and this is probably one of the saddest statistics I've ever heard, states like Georgia, for example, Florida as well, Georgia has lost more people to coronavirus in 2021 than they did in 2020.
Wow.
And considering that the vaccine came out in January and was available to most people by March, that's a truly that is a statistic that makes me very sad on a personal level, that post-vaccine we actually have lost more people than we did in the initial wave. And that's very unfortunate. Very unfortunate.
Yeah, it
So
is. It is. So would you say social media played a big role in that too? In that during that whole
an absolutely massive role. New polls are coming out and showing the increased manner with which people are getting their news off of Facebook. And given what we know about the algorithm, how it funnels information to people, because social media, especially Facebook, is actually interesting that you asked this question today, because after the whistleblower report that came out on 60 Minutes last night from a former Facebook executive, um, we've always known that the algorithm on social media, like YouTube, but Facebook in particular,
right.
the more you interacted with a post, the more those types of posts and similar content was fed into your news feed, because you had shown that you would interact with it. What we didn't realize, and what it appears to be the case, at least according to this whistleblower, is that Facebook changed its algorithm to apparently promote negative content more. So it was basically forcing content to get more and more negative in order for the algorithm to feed it to people, because we now appear to have information that suggests that the political parties were complaining to Facebook, or saying that we know you've changed our algorithm, because when we put out a story that is fairly neutral in content, or advertisements that are fairly neutral, they get very little interaction. But when we put out something that is very negative, all of the people that we are trying to reach respond to it. And Facebook is completely 100% driven by interaction, and it promotes anything that drives interaction. And unfortunately, it appears that negativity is the overwhelming driving force of interaction on social media. And I think if this pandemic happens 20 years ago, and there is no social media, there's no Facebook, there's nothing feeding people misinformation left and right, there is no YouTube, I think this pandemic looks completely different. If we have all the same, if we have all the same technology, and we don't have any social media, I think this pandemic looks completely different right now. If the vaccine comes out in January and there's no social media, I think there's plenty of evidence to suggest that the pandemic probably would look a lot different than it does now. I think it would be well behind us at this point, to be quite honest.
Oh yeah,
To be quite honest.
Yep, I am in a complete agreement with you on that. So
Yeah.
so
So,
Professor Elliott,
it's very unfortunate.
yes sir, it is. So Professor Elliott, you teach American government at Georgia State. So I know that's not really it's between the kids. It's not really an interesting topic to many people. But how would you?
Yeah.
So, what do you find is the most efficient way to get the material across to your students as an instructor, as a collegiate instructor? Um, so,
Okay. As you know, since you are in my class, I try to encourage discussion. I try to encourage interaction. Now, there are some things that you simply can't do, like when you're going through the qualifications to be in Congress or explaining the filibuster. Those are hard things to promote interaction because. But when you're asking questions about, I try to get my students to engage on I try to engage them with topics that make sure that they understand how much these things actually do matter to them, that it's not just a course that they are taking, that taxes matter to them, public policy matters to them. The strength of appointees at, bureaucratic agencies matters to their lives. And who we elect president matters to their life. Who you elect as your representative matters to their life. So I try to stay 100% apolitical when at all times. I do not believe it is my job to indoctrinate. I believe it is my job to inform with facts, and then honestly try to play devil's advocate whenever possible to get students to think on both sides of a position, because I firmly believe, more than I believe anything else, that you need to be able to have your your views challenged, and then educate yourself in every way possible about a certain issue. And then wherever you land is fine, as long as you are seeking knowledge from objective sources and you come to your own conclusions, because eventually that's all we can do. But do it from a fact-based position, not from some that you're afraid to have challenged what you think about something. I think honestly, it's just life philosophy. Always, always, always try to keep learning.
Yes, sir.
At everything you do, cooking, whatever, everything.
Yes, sir.
Always try. Yeah.
So, I'm a current freshman in college, Professor Elliot, and
Mm-hmm.
others out there that might be watching this could be as well. So, what's some advice you would give us as we're heading into what week 7, I believe, of the year, the semester? So, we're heading to week 7. Uh, what's some advice you would give us to keep going and just as we're moving throughout our freshman year?
Okay. Start working now on mastering time management. At this point, you now have a feel for what collegiate work is like and what is expected of you. And for most freshman students, at least at Perimeter College, that is a very eye-opening experience about what is expected, how to embrace the material. Usually, when students are struggling at this point, it has to do with time management skills that need to develop. So first of all, I would take a deep breath and look back on how the first 7 weeks have gone and be honest about, you know, how did I use my time? That test that I maybe didn't do well on, did I really, if I'm honest with myself, did I prepare for it adequately, or did I just wait till the night before and open up the book and study as hard as I could for one night? I would take a moment to stop and take inventory, and then realize also that you're 7 weeks into your freshman year. It is a long path. It is a marathon, not a sprint. If you have had a rough go of it at first, if there are easy factors to identify how you've struggled, work on those. Use the college's resources if you need them, tutoring sessions, etc., things like that.
Right.
Take advantage of those resources. A lot of students don't do that. A lot of students, they just silently struggle. But you're paying, part of your tuition goes to pay for those services. And I would take full advantage of them, because a lot of students struggle with things that they don't even realize that they're struggling with, like note taking, or people need to figure out, especially in your freshman year, the quicker you can figure this out, like what is the best way that you ingest material, that you can take material in and it actually sticks. For me, it helps for me to read it, highlight it, retype it, and then break it down. That's how, when I was in graduate school, those are things I had to do to get by, because the amount of information was so much. Okay. But the quicker you learn those things now with modern technology, I've never been a student where you had all the tools available to you, where books will read aloud to you now, where for free,
Right.
that you can highlight a whole section and then save it as a cliff note. Like, just working on your study skills in ways that will benefit you, and time management. If you can manage your time as a freshman in college, that is a huge advantage to most people who are already in their adulthood, to be honest with you. It's a
Yes,
huge
sir.
skill, huge skill.
Yeah, that's a
So
good point you made, and that's something I'm trying to continue to work at, being better at. But I think
yeah,
for the most part, it's been going pretty good. So obviously, it's just keep
good.
getting better every day. Just keep getting better. You learn something new about how you
Yeah.
work best every day. So
And I mean, I have to be sympathetic here for 1 second. I am not envious of students in this day and age having to try to focus and study with all the distractions that you have that I did not have to deal with. When I started college in 1995, there was no such thing as a cell phone. We had answering machines and cable television, and that was it. And you guys are sitting there trying to study, and you've got your phone beeping, you've got your tablet, you've got all these other things, you've got every movie that you could possibly want to watch right there on your phone. I'm not envious of it. It's a harder environment to focus in. There's no doubt about that. So I wish you guys the best as you're developing these skills, because it is definitely harder for you guys than it was for us. We didn't have that many things to distract us.
right,
So
yeah, I guess that's what they say. You know,
yeah,
you can technology, you can live with it, you can live without it. I guess.
yep,
So
yep.
yep,
Hard to stay away from for sure.
blessing and a curse, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So as we're wrapping up here, Professor Elliot, what would you say is your favorite TV show and why? Just wanted to throw this in there for you.
Comedy or
Just
drama?
anything.
Okay, comedy without a doubt, hands down, it's Seinfeld. And drama, as far as the television show goes, Breaking Bad is going to be hard to beat. I did very much enjoy Game of Thrones, but I don't know, because once you see something, I like The Last Kingdom. I think it's really well done and extremely interesting. Um, but TV show overall for a cable series that I think was just impeccably done, and timed well, I'd have to go with Breaking Bad. If you're gonna make me narrow it down, I'd have to go with Breaking Bad. So
That's a great choice. I would say
yeah. How about yourself?
I would say it has to be um, All American. My favorite TV show on Netflix. It's a great watch, by the way.
Okay,
It's
my wife enjoys that.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So if you haven't, anybody out there watching, if you have not watched All American yet, I mean, I have no idea how you have not, but you got to. It's a great
Okay.
show, great series. I totally recommend it. So
Okay.
that about wraps us up tonight, Professor Elliott. Again, I appreciate you coming on tonight. I appreciate it. It's
My pleasure. My pleasure.
yes, sir. It's been great
So
talking with you.
okay, I've enjoyed it. Have a good evening.
You too.